During Christmas dinner, my mom announced, "We're selling the house. Your sister needs the money for her startup." I asked, "What about the $35,000 I put into renovations?" My dad laughed. "Consider it rent for all those years." I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and showed them the lien I'd filed that morning. Their faces went white when they realized they couldn't sell without my permission. I, 32M, had been living in my childhood home for the past 6 years, ever since I graduated college and started my career in software development. What began as a temporary arrangement while I saved money had evolved into something more permanent when my parents suggested I stay and help with the mortgage. They were approaching retirement, and the extra income helped everyone. Over those 6 years, I had invested heavily in the house. New kitchen appliances, bathroom renovations, flooring throughout the main level, a complete basement remodel, and modernizing the electrical system. $35,000 of my own money, all documented with receipts and permits. I had treated it like my future home, because my parents had hinted multiple times that the house would eventually be mine since my sister had moved across the country and shown no interest in returning. My sister had always been the golden child. While I worked my way through college and took out loans, she had received a full ride from our parents. When she struggled to find work after graduation, they supported her financially for 2 years. When she decided to move to California to find herself, they helped with the relocation costs. The pattern was clear, but I had made peace with it years ago. Christmas dinner started normally. Mom had prepared her usual feast, and we were all gathered around the dining room table that I had helped refinish the previous summer. Dad was in good spirits, telling stories about his golf games, and Mom was fussing over everyone's plates. My sister had flown in from California, full of excitement about some new business venture. The conversation flowed naturally until Mom set down her fork and cleared her throat with that particular tone that meant she had something important to announce. The room fell quiet as she looked around the table with what I now realize was a carefully rehearsed expression. She told us that she and Dad had made a decision about the house. They were planning to sell it in the spring. The real estate market was hot, and they could get top dollar. My sister had this amazing opportunity with her startup, something about sustainable fashion, and she needed capital to get it off the ground. The house sale would provide that seed money, while also allowing Mom and Dad to move into a smaller condo they had been eyeing. I felt the blood drain from my face as the words sank in. I asked about the renovations I had done, the money I had invested in making the house better. Surely that would be factored into any arrangement. Dad actually laughed. He said I should consider it rent for all the years I had lived there practically for free. Mom nodded along, adding that I was young and could easily find my own place with all the money I had been saving by living at home. My sister jumped in, explaining how this startup was going to revolutionize sustainable fashion and how grateful she was that the family was supporting her dreams. She promised that once the business took off, she would pay everyone back with interest. I sat there listening to them divide up my investment like it was nothing more than a generous tip. 6 years of treating this place like my home, of planning my future around eventually inheriting it, of investing my savings into improvements that I thought would benefit all of us. All of it dismissed with a wave of Dad's hand and a lecture about responsibility and pulling myself up by my bootstraps. But I just smiled. I pulled out my phone and opened the document I had saved in my files. That morning, after weeks of suspecting something like this might happen, I had taken a step to protect my interests. I showed them the screen. It was a copy of the lien I had filed against the property earlier that day. Every renovation, every improvement, every dollar I had invested was documented and legally attached to the house. The look of confusion on their faces was almost comical. Dad asked what exactly he was looking at. I explained that a contractor's lien was a legal claim against property for work performed or materials supplied. Since I had documentation proving I had improved the property with my own money, I had every right to file for compensation before any sale could proceed. Mom's face went white as she realized what this meant. I told them that according to my research, and confirmed by the lawyer I had consulted that morning, they could not sell the house without either paying me the full amount of the lien or getting my written agreement to waive it. The silence that followed was deafening. My sister was the first to speak, asking if I was seriously going to sabotage her business opportunity over some home improvements. I reminded her that $35,000 wasn't just some improvements to someone like me. and that maybe she should have discussed this family decision with the family before making plans with my money. Dad's initial reaction was anger. He demanded to know when I had become so calculating and selfish. I told him I had learned from watching how the family operated, and that maybe he should have considered the legal implications before dismissing my investment as rent money. Mom tried to play peacemaker, suggesting we could work something out. Perhaps they could give me a portion of the sale proceeds that would cover my improvements. I appreciated the gesture, but pointed out that my lien was for the full amount plus interest and that I had no obligation to accept less. The rest of Christmas dinner was an exercise in uncomfortable silence punctuated by tense whispers between my parents and my sister. I finished my meal and excused myself to the basement, where I had set up my home office. Over the next few days, the house was filled with heated phone conversations and closed-door meetings. My sister extended her stay to help figure out how to resolve the situation. Various solutions were proposed, from family loans to restructured timelines, but none of them addressed the fundamental issue that I had been excluded from a major decision that directly affected my financial interests. A week after Christmas, Mom approached me with a more serious proposal. They were willing to acknowledge my improvements and pay me back, but it would mean significantly less money for my sister's startup. They asked if I would consider a partial payment and a promissory note for the rest. I told her I would think about it, but that any agreement would need to be in writing and reviewed by a lawyer. The days of handshake deals and family trust were clearly over. My sister tried a different approach, appealing to family loyalty and shared success. She painted a picture of how her business would benefit everyone in the long run, and how this temporary sacrifice would pay dividends later. I listened politely, but reminded her that I had made my own sacrifices for years, and that her promises of future returns weren't legally binding. Update 1. 2 weeks into January, my parents' real estate agent contacted them about a potential buyer who was ready to make an offer above asking price. The urgency of the situation finally forced a real conversation about resolving the lien. Dad sat me down for what he called a man-to-man discussion. He admitted that they had not considered the legal implications of their decision and that they had assumed I would simply go along with the family plan, as I always had. He acknowledged that my investments in the house were substantial and that dismissing them as rent had been unfair. However, he also expressed frustration that I had gone behind their backs to file the lien instead of discussing my concerns openly. I reminded him that their Christmas announcement had been the first I had heard of any plan to sell, and that they had made it clear my opinion wasn't part of the decision-making process. We spent hours going through the documentation of my improvements. Receipts, permits, before and after photos, contractor invoices. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously organized. Dad seemed genuinely surprised by the scope of what I had done and the money I had invested. Mom joined us later and suggested bringing in a neutral third party to appraise the improvements and determine fair compensation. I agreed, provided that we also had a lawyer draft any agreement to ensure everyone's interests were protected. My sister was less receptive to compromise. She accused me of holding the family hostage over money and suggested that I was being vindictive about years of perceived favoritism. I didn't deny that there was some truth to her accusation, but pointed out that fair treatment shouldn't require vindictiveness to achieve. The appraiser who came to evaluate my improvements was thorough and professional. He spent an entire day measuring, photographing, and documenting every change I had made to the property. His report, delivered a week later, valued my improvements at $42,000, factoring in current market rates and the quality of the work. This created a new problem. The lien amount had been conservative, but the professional appraisal showed I had actually underclaimed my investment. My parents were now facing the possibility of owing me more than they had originally dismissed. Update 2. February brought a series of family meetings that felt more like business negotiations than family discussions. My sister had returned to California but participated via video calls that often ended in arguments and disconnected internet. The potential buyers were still interested but had given a deadline for resolving any title issues. My parents were caught between needing to close the sale and not having liquid assets to pay off the lien. Mom suggested that instead of cash payment, I could receive ownership stake in the house proportional to my investment. This would mean that when they sold, I would receive my percentage of the proceeds rather than a fixed dollar amount. Given that the house had appreciated significantly, this could actually work in my favor. I consulted with my lawyer about this arrangement. She explained that it would require restructuring the property title and could complicate the sale process, but it was legally feasible. More importantly, it would ensure that I received fair compensation based on the actual sale price rather than predetermined amounts. Dad was initially resistant to this idea because it meant giving up partial ownership of his home to his son. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was more comfortable dismissing my investment entirely than acknowledging it legally. My sister predictably opposed any solution that reduced the money available for her startup. She proposed alternative funding sources, from small business loans to investor partnerships, but admitted that family money had been her preferred option because it came without the pressure and obligations of external funding. During one particularly heated video call, she accused me of destroying her dreams out of spite. I told her that her dreams had been built on the assumption that my money was available without my consent, and that sustainable business models shouldn't depend on involuntary family subsidies. The breakthrough came when Mom suggested that instead of fighting over the house sale, we should focus on finding a solution that worked for everyone's long-term interests. She proposed that I could maintain my lien and receive payment from the sale proceeds, but that I could also choose to invest some of that money in my sister's startup if I believed in the business model. This shifted the conversation from family obligations to business decisions. I told my sister that if she wanted my investment in her startup, she needed to present a proper business plan with financial projections, market analysis, and clear terms for any investment. The days of asking for money based on family loyalty were over. Update 3. March brought resolution, though not in the way anyone had originally expected. My sister had spent the previous month putting together a comprehensive business plan for her sustainable fashion startup. The process had been good for her, forcing her to research her market, identify realistic funding needs, and develop concrete strategies for success. When she presented the plan to the family, it was clear that she had done her homework. The business model was sound, the market analysis was thorough, and her financial projections were conservative but promising. More importantly, she had identified multiple funding sources and reduced her dependence on family money. I was impressed despite myself. This was the first time I had seen my sister approach anything with this level of preparation and professionalism. Her original request for startup capital had been vague and emotion-based, but this presentation was the work of someone who understood business realities. The house sale proceeded with the lien resolved through the percentage ownership arrangement. When the sale closed in April, I received $51,000 as my share of the proceeds, significantly more than my original investment due to the property's appreciation. My parents used their portion to purchase a smaller condo and invest in their retirement accounts. They seemed relieved to be free of house maintenance and genuinely happy with their new living situation. As for my sister's startup, I ultimately decided to invest $15,000 in exchange for a small equity stake and a seat on her advisory board. This wasn't family charity but a business decision based on her solid planning and my belief in the market opportunity. The remaining $36,000 became the down payment on my own house, a modest place that I could improve and invest in without worrying about family politics or surprise announcements. The whole experience fundamentally changed our family dynamics. Conversations became more direct and businesslike when money was involved. Decisions that affected multiple family members were now discussed openly rather than announced as fait accompli. Most importantly, everyone's contributions and investments were acknowledged and respected. My relationship with my sister actually improved once we established clear boundaries and mutual respect. Her business has shown steady growth over the past year, and she has become genuinely appreciative of having family members who hold her accountable to professional standards rather than simply providing unconditional support. Dad and I still play golf occasionally, though our conversations now include more discussions about investments and business decisions. He has admitted that the lien situation taught him to consider legal implications before making family financial decisions, and that my response, while surprising, had been entirely justified. Mom has become something of a family mediator, ensuring that major decisions are discussed with everyone who might be affected before final plans are made. She has also started asking more questions about my work and investments, showing an interest in my professional life that had been absent for years. Looking back, that Christmas dinner announcement was the catalyst for establishing healthier family relationships based on mutual respect rather than assumed obligations. The lien wasn't just about protecting my financial interests. It was about demanding to be treated as an equal adult family member whose contributions and opinions mattered. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to refuse to enable their poor decisions, even when it creates temporary conflict. My $35,000 investment in house improvements ultimately purchased something much more valuable: respect, boundaries, and honest communication that has strengthened our family relationships in ways that unconditional compliance never could have achieved. The house sold for significantly more than expected. My sister's business is thriving, my parents are enjoying retirement, and I'm building equity in my own home. Everyone got what they needed, just not in the way they originally planned. Sometimes the best family outcomes require the courage to say no to family pressure and yes to fair treatment.